Data Center Carbon Emissions Calculator Tutorial Part 3, VM Calculator, CSP. This calculator sheet estimates the emissions associated with instances operated under leading cloud service providers, or CSPs. At the topmost part of the sheet is the reporting period and summary of emissions. The reporting period indicates the period that you would be doing the emissions reporting for, whether it be for the past year, quarter, or half year, etc. This is an identifier of your emission. At the same time, this will direct you on what value will the other inputs have to be to calculate your emissions. Towards the right of the reporting period is the summary of emissions. This gives the total emissions of all the inputs in the table below, which is for the calculation of instance-level emissions. Looking at the table below, there are several inputs required, and each requires different sources. Let's first take a look at the CSP information. Under the CSP information are the CSP column, the grid emission factor GEF, and the renewable energy used REU. The database used in this tool is based on several major CSPs. The first input required is the hosting location of the virtual machine VM. After this is the grid emission factor. GEF's default value comes from the latest EMA published GEF for Singapore. This is under the assumption that most of the services used will be coming from the Singapore region. However, on cases where instances are from outside Singapore, the user can input the GEF of that region under the user input value, and it will overwrite the default GEF value. To do that, first you need to identify the region where you will be creating your VM, or where your running VM is currently located. This varies from CSP to CSP. During the creation of instance for some CSP, one of the first few inputs required will be the region where you'd be getting the VM from. In some cases, there will be a generic region located in the interface, and all services obtained will be from that region. That region may be changed whenever the user deems to toggle between regions. After identifying the region, the user would have to find the EMA equivalent of that region that publishes that region's GEF. This is the process required to get the GEF for regions outside Singapore. The last input required for the CSP information table is the renewable energy used. In consideration of the principle of conservatism, the default value that we have placed is 0%. Not all CSP has procured REU, and we have deemed it best to put it this way. Again, for a more accurate emission calculation, it is recommended to use the REU published by your CSP. CSPs would usually publish their REU under their annual sustainability report, and it is best to make use of that. In the case of it not being publicly available, you may contact the CSP representative, and they should be able to give you the value for that. The next part of the table are the instance information table and default instance information table. What's the difference between the two? The instance information is where we will be inputting our values. And as we have mentioned earlier, the database we are using are from the CSPs themselves. And to confirm whether the instance input we have in our database coincides with the correct amount of vCPU, memory, and storage used by the CSP, we have added the default instance information for data comparison. Upon the creation of instance, various instance information will be provided in the dashboard. This includes the instance category, instance family, instance model, and additional storage options and inclusions. Match the corresponding data to the respective columns to specify the instance information. Do note that we are only considering general purpose, compute optimized, and memory optimized instances for the CSP calculator. Only the user-defined calculator has the option to use the average of the 3 instances to generate Emissions for instances outside these three instances. Upon finalizing all inputs for the instance information, values will appear under the default instance information table. You would have to make sure that the values appearing under the default instance information matches exactly with the values provided by the CSPs in their dashboard interface. This way, we can understand that the database we have is current, updated, and applicable. Once you have confirmed that everything matches, then you may proceed with the next part, which is the utilization information. The last part of inputs required before the results is the utilization information table. The default value we have for the utilization percent is 8%. This value has been obtained from various CSPs data and has been validated through stakeholder engagement and operational data. Again, for a more accurate emission calculation, we recommend using your actual utilization percent. The default value for the annual instance hours is 8,760 hours, meaning the VM is going to be running 24/7, 365 days a year. Again, this is in consideration of the principle of conservatism. In your dashboard, there should be a chart table that represents your CPU utilization varying from 0 to 1 or 0 to 100% across a time period. You may extract the data from this and get the average utilization percent depending on your specific reporting period, as well as the total instance hours you have accumulated for that specific instance. These inputs should then be placed under the respective columns of the utilization information table. That's it for the VM Calculator CSP. Upon filling in the necessary data for an instance, the respective cell under the status bar column should indicate a complete entry cell. The output column should also display the emission associated with this specific VM. There is a range value for the output column, as CSPs sometimes provide various vCPU corresponding to different TDP for a specific instance model. Given that the actual data of what specific vCPU will be used is abstracted from the user, we opted to provide both a range and a median value for the instance emission. That concludes the tutorial on using the VM Calculator CSPs. Thank you very much for watching.